Okay, well, welcome everybody to the first of the 2021 series on recovery through community-based approaches, which is being delivered by LDnet with support from a range of organizations, including the RSA, ELAD, I think FARNet can be mentioned since they're speaking now today. And possibly others that haven't someone will remind me of who I've left off. This is the first in the series on new opportunities and challenges for local development in a post-COVID world. The intention is that this is a quite short and strict hour, so it doesn't take up your whole evening. You don't have to worry that it's going to go too long. You can have a drink while you're watching because it's 6 o'clock, so that's known as beer o'clock in England, and different things here in France, wine o'clock perhaps. You can, the other thing is we intend it to be very active and participative. So do think about questions, and if you have something that you want to raise, already put it in the chat, and then we can pick you up, and we'll come back to you when the Q&A starts, the question and answer starts in about half an hour's time after we've heard the first the presentations. Just to keep you informed, the second one is going to be about local development in circles. Communities in circles, new forms of local development. And the third one is going to be on new forms of exclusion, how communities are combating various types, including digital and fuel and other types of exclusion, which have become noteworthy during this time. And of course, digital exclusion is particularly relevant for children and communities in general, and keeping in touch as we're now digital. I'm going to pass on to Ursula, who's the curator for this one and is sort of co-organizing with me the whole series. So Ursula, I hand over to you.
Many thanks, Peter, and welcome everybody. Great to see so many old friends and some also new people joining this webinar. So we're trying to think of what the COVID crisis has brought or is going to bring to the local communities, and how they're dealing with the challenges and the opportunities that emerge as a result. So yes, this is still for us a new phenomenon, the COVID pandemics, but also an unprecedented range of restrictions and changes in the lives and behaviors of the society that we're still trying to measure the impact of, but we clearly see that the ways people travel, the ways people spend their free time, the ways people meet and interact will be very strongly affected. But also, and that's the economic side, there will be a big impact on businesses, of course, primarily hotels, restaurants, but also businesses linked to travel. Also some primary sector. When in FARNet, we could see in the first phase of the pandemics that even the fishing sector was actually, the fishing activity was not possible for a time. Also in agriculture, the whole issue of having seasonal, like harvesting, short-term workers, interim workers who were not able to arrive on time to help with that. So a whole range of impacts across really the whole of economy and the whole of society, as we all know and observe. The interesting thing is that while very often at the national, at the, let's say, higher decision-making level, we could observe certain stages where there was uncertainty how to react, or maybe very often trial and error reactions. At the local level, the communities did not remain idle. They did not just passively react to the situation and say, okay, we just have to wait what happens, or we just have to wait for someone to decide for us what to do. But they actually took the initiative in many cases. And we would like to share actually some examples with you of what happens at the local level right now, or what was happening from last spring. Both in rural areas, in urban areas, and in coastal areas, which are dependent on fisheries. There are a lot of interesting things happening by the reaction of the local communities. And of course, where the first reactions were very quick fixes, trying to see how the situation changes, for the moment reacting to the urgent needs for personal protection equipment and so on. But very soon, those communities went on to more comprehensive solutions, trying to address the economic, the business needs or the societal needs with new solutions. And also a more strategic approach, trying to think, what can we do differently in the future? And we will have examples of such activities very, very shortly. Just to say, especially, we are very grateful to the organizations that partnered with us to organize this webinar, and to provide speakers, especially ELAR, the European Leader Association for Rural Development, and the Spanish Leader Network, and also the FARNet Fisheries Areas Network, the European Fisheries Areas Network, and FARNet Support Unit to provide the coastal and fisheries examples. So I would like to invite now the three speakers, the presentations, to share examples about what the things that are being done at the local level. Starting with the rural example from Spain, we have with us Lola Fernandez Perpignan and Fausto González Eguido from the leader local action group called ADAC, from the region of Castilla-La Mancha, the Guadalajara. They're going to share with us the activities of their local community and their local organization. I think Lola and Fausto, you are ready. You can go and share your screen and go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon at the webinar. And sorry to wear the mask, but it's the correct way in this time. Sorry. My name is Fausto González Ejido. I'm an agricultural engineer and the manager of ADAC from Guadalajara, Castilla-La Mancha, Spain. Okay. We are also going to show you some of the lines work, the work line that we did in 2020 in COVID time, relating to good practice, okay? She's my co-worker, my partner. Her name is Lola, and she was the responsible of the project. Of course, at the end of the presentation, you can find our email direction, our email address, in case someone want to ask some question after the webinar. So please, Lola, throw too much and open the door. I am open the window.
Hello, everybody. We are very grateful of being here today to expose our experience. I'm going to share my screen. Better this way. Faced with the COVID crisis, ADAC decided to carry out a necessity detection study. We knew that there were certain sectors that were particularly affected, but we didn't know to what degree. So we decided to carry out an analysis through a survey with specific questions to know what needs all the companies, especially the more vulnerable ones. The fundamental objective was to be able to anticipate the consequence in the most collected, especially the more vulnerable ones. The fundamental objective was to be able to anticipate the consequence in the most appropriate way possible in order to offer adequate solutions from leaders. In addition, all the conclusions were collected in a report with the proposal for measures to be adopted to alleviate the negative impacts. It was important for us to understand the new business fabric and the most vulnerable sectors after COVID to have an approximate radiography of each sector in order to adapt the grants and the resources available to this new situation. Based on the results, ADAC detected 4 big needs that were implemented by the following actions. In the first place, the survey showed us the need of reinventing all models of business to new ones in order to continue providing online customer service. As many of the companies didn't know how to make their business visible on internet, we hired a special company to make a webinar with useful marketing tools to make their business visible after the COVID-19 crisis. More than 20% of the companies attending implemented the webinar tools in its business, especially the application to make a reservation or home orders of food that facilitated the control of attendance to restaurants and the orders of food at home. Secondly, the need of training on security protocols to assure clients and comply with current regulation. As we detected that it was necessary to have quality information about security protocols, we launched a web seminar called COVID-19 Protocol for a Safe Opening in the Tourist and Restaurant Sector. The activity was carried out by a specialized company giving a web seminar so that the companies knew about the Safe Tourist Certificate, a certificate to distinguish the companies that have installed measures. In this case, the web seminar didn't have the expected repercussions, and the companies didn't implement the certificate because it supposed high cost and physical effort and didn't guarantee a greater flow of clients. Thirdly, the economic consequence. The survey focused us in the need of grants to invest in new projects according to the new situation and to adapt the facilities to the new regulations. So we prepared a line of leader grants with 600,000 euros that were published in July 2020. And finally, the problem of access to workers, especially in the agri-food sector. Asparagus are cultivated in a ADAC area and is an important resource for the region. ADAC has grouped asparagus producers in an association to study the possibility of a quality mark. In this process, the asparagus collection campaign began just when we were confined. Spain borders were closed and the temporaries couldn't travel to our country, and a tremendous problem was generated in the time of collecting the harvest because the asparagus producers didn't have enough means. ADAC was one of the channels that was used to find workers. We used ADAC social network platforms to inform and collect the curriculums, and the association established a curriculum collection point for us to send them all. 800 contacts were obtained, and 25% of them were hired, allowing producers to save their crops. Looking back, when the pandemic came, we were working on one of our fundamental objectives, to fight against the population. What we didn't expect was that despite the negative repercussion for some sectors, the pandemic could suppose an opportunity to open away a new approaches, since many people have moved to the rural environment to live, with the option of telecommuting. To give support to this new opportunity, Castilla-La Mancha labs have been inspired and participated in the drafting of the population law in Castilla-La Mancha, law of social and tax economic measures for the population and rural development in Castilla-La Mancha. Among other measures, we request novelties for priority in the application of structural funds in poorly populated areas and the reduction of taxation for residents and business that have activity in these areas. The lines of action focus on insisting the regional government on the improvement on the communication networks, broadband and optical fiber in rural areas. The government has committed that it will carry it out in a maximum of 3 years. The extension of the broadband is already being carried out in locations of less than 100 inhabitants with a local operator financed by the LDnet program. We are promoting too the implementation of the rural ticket, a proposal to subsidize the promoters while the project is starting up. We would like to end our presentation with a phrase from Cal Gibran. Por muy larga que sea la tormenta, el sol siempre vuelve a brillar entre las nubes. No matter how long the storm lasts, the sun always shines behind the clouds.
Excellent.
Thank you very much,
Lola? Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it was great, very succinct, very good for timekeeping, and we really showed a wide variety, like a very systematic chain of actions that you undertook. So hopefully there will be a lot of questions in the discussion, but for the time and for everybody to put your questions and comments in the chat, as Peter already mentioned, to just ask, if you don't hesitate to raise issues that you like to discuss in the discussion part. But for the moment, we move on to the next presentation. So it will be Giuseppe Pace, who is from the Institute of Studies on the Mediterranean from Naples. And he's also a member of the LDnet board. And he's going to speak about the experience of Naples post-COVID, especially in terms of sustainable tourism. Giuseppe, it's your turn.
Thank you, Ursula. And okay, I will share my screen. Okay, and I will start this presentation. So I have also to, okay. Can you see now? Yes, perfect.
Yes, that's good.
So, I'm going to present this not post-COVID, but during COVID situation at the moment in Naples, and is the urban case of this webinar. So it's the most fragmented one. Basically, why Naples? Naples is one of the main cities of Italy, 3 million of people in the metropolitan area, and also its center is a site of World Heritage list. So since 1995, and it was growing in the tourist sector in a very, very massive way from 2010, 2011 to 2019. So it was really the not mature tourism was still growing. So it's interesting to see what happens in one of the most damaged sectors in this COVID period, that is the tourism. And what happens where the tourism was was becoming the greatest economic resource of the city, in a city that has no industrial sectors or other kind of sectors, but was basically basing its surviving on tourism. So this current drastic reduction gave us the possibility to analyze in a first way how the local system reacted. And then we start asking ourselves about public policies, the behaviors of the private sector, and also the perception of the citizens. And that's what we did in 2 ways, with a sort of desk analysis and with several interviews at phone or Zoom. Then maybe we are going to collect in a movie in the future, but for this time, I have only little time to sketch. And it was a good time for Italy before COVID, and since 20 years, since 2004, Italy was growing greatly in touristic numbers, and Naples started later, about 2010, as I told you, but it was thanks to four main factors. First, it was the change of reputation of the city. The second one was the availability of low-cost accommodations. Then it was a better connection with better airport system and low flight companies. And then there was a better management of cultural heritage sites from the public sector and also from the private sector. All these brought to a better score for destination reputation and a growth of arrivals sustained for about 10 years. So that was apparently fantastic, but as anything is growing so fast, there are some missing points, and the missing points were basically that the local market was really fragmented. There was no coordination, and basically there was not a strategic marketing position. I would like to say also there was no any kind of idea to support, with some digital tools, the different kind of stakeholders of the system. There was no any kind of information. Everybody was behaving in an isolated way. And then the municipality of Naples started a sort of strategic marketing plan that basically was considering that the market for tourism was growing without any problems until 2030. So no idea of sustainability questions and no any kind of idea to attract also small investors or other kind of spontaneous sectors. Were playing roles in the game. And also we are looking at the social network of people. So basically we went in the COVID time, and the situation was dramatic. Big cities were dropping on 73% in Italy. And even more, Naples was penalized because people coming to Campania were going to the seaside during summertime and not in the city, in historic cities. So the situation in Naples was even worse, and the numbers are not finalized, but they say about 80%, 82% of reduction. So privates tried to change their policy. And I don't go to the detail with Airbnb, but from data of Airbnb, the people started moving their participation in this process of short-time renting to longer-time renting, or with temporary people, or with families. So going back to the market, the housing market. And the other time, there was a certain kind of a strange consideration of the COVID as just like an accident that will finish one day. So what we need to do is only to analyze when the vaccination process will be last. And at the same time, there were others that were telling us that, okay, but the tourism will not run in the same way than in the past, as also Ursula anticipated before. So we will need much more health attention. We will ask for more environmental issues and more digitalization technologies. And also, let's learn from the COVID and let's diversify our productive approach to tourism. That was more or less the solution from one of the consulting company of the region. And then we go how we perceived, and we perceived it in 5 different kind of sectors. So we went to our interviews operators. They were much oriented in be supported by the state. The state is the main supporter for them, and they need to have support from the financial point of view, from the certainty, and they want to be supported also fighting against illegality or informal business. And then from the other side, the state represented by the region, and it was nice to have an interview with them. They were saying, okay, the privacy is very important for us, so important that we want to change the governance model, and we are going to put inside our new, let's say, proposals for the 2021-2027 funding. So, everybody was ready to change. And the expert was saying that the COVID was a good thing for Naples because the tourism was going in the wrong side, and stopping and reflective activity during this time will be helpful for having a good and sustainable tourism in the future. But okay, let's ask also to the social side of the story, because from the social side, we discovered that foundation cooperatives were promoting their sites or their activities in tourism, but without targeting potential tourism in the short time, or without having resources for digitalizing or skills for developing any kind of attractive tool for the international market. So they were isolated, let alone. So they were losing their, let's say, financial capacities, and they were, let's say, working only on crowdfunding with small success. Finally, there were the heritage institutions, the public ones. They were only interested in maintaining the attention to them, exhibition, webinars, or waiting for a reopening, future reopening, and bringing back to the old behaviors. Few of them, they ask for digital transition, so to enter in an integrated system for attracting tourists or other kind of internet users. And then the good thing that during this year, we were just at the time to prepare a regional, let's say, strategy for the youth regional funds 2021-2027. So the region, let's say, with very good attention, include all these elements and introduce three main new transversal drivers for development. They were, one of them, the culture. So culture was as a factor, and in the culture factor, there was culture. So tourism, I was saying. So actions were more or less the usual: local economic development, heritage management and preservation, cultural and creative entrepreneurship, and promoting the touristic destinations as excellence of the region. So in this case, it was just like a destination management. As you can see, then what they were, let's say, suggesting in a certain way is not yet clear, but it should be then structured. That is the digital transitions, and also how to connect the infrastructure and also this sustainability with the tourism. It's not even clear.
Sorry, Giuseppe, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Yes,
you really have to wrap up. Okay. Sorry, thanks.
Finished. I have 7 minutes and finished. So finally, if we say if pandemics was an opportunity for reducing mistakes, yes, it could be. But we need to understand that it's a need for developing skills and to work on digital much more than we imagine. Digital connected to sustainability. Sustainability means that we have to support, from one side, the public sector in doing the right choices with data, transparent data, and from other side, helping from the public, the private sector to behave in a sort of cooperative way. That is not so easy. And that's more or less the idea, to have a platform, but you know, time is short, so we can have a chat after and we can discuss about it. Thank you. So done. And
great. Thank you very much. Sorry to be rushing you. I know, but there will be an opportunity. I'm sure there will be questions. There will be questions, because that's a very interesting example of using the opportunity of the pandemics to change your orientation and to do something differently. Okay, and then very quickly, Monica Veronesi-Burch from the Farnet Support Unit, the team leader, for the examples from the fisheries and coastal areas. Monica, over to you.
Okay, hi everyone. Do you see that? Is that, hang on a second, I'm not in the mode. There we go. Right, is that good?
That's great.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Ursula, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. So I was just going to say a few words from the perspective of local fisheries communities. Farnet's the network of support network basically to all the fisheries local action groups, the flags. So here's just a couple of examples of how the flags have been helping their communities at this time. Okay, just a little overview of the types of things they're doing, and then I'm going to give you two small examples. So first of all, in terms of the range of different things that some flags are doing, we see all sorts of actions ranging from providing direct support for personal protective equipment to actually keep the sector going. That was mainly last year when the first confinement happened, and the fisheries sector, basically a lot of sectors were closed down for a certain time. So there was support in some areas to actually allow them to keep working, putting in place social distancing measures, etc. You have quite a few flags working on the promotion of the seafood sector, again, to maintain the market for fisheries products, in particular local markets, as some of the longer supply chains were disrupted. Facilitating the move to digital sales, that was again, a lot of the flags try to support their fishermen to move into selling online. And one of the examples I'm going to show you afterwards shows how that it's an example of one of the flags that was already equipped, because of course moving on to digital takes a while. So if that wasn't done previously, then that means people weren't equipped to jump into direct sales quite so easily. Other flags have worked with their regional authorities to try and minimize the restrictions that were being put in place on fishermen's activities. And other examples show how local people managed to actually come up with new products, adapt their activities to produce, for example, hand sanitizer in one area, and in quite a few areas we see new partnerships forming to try and deal with the short-term issues that people were facing in terms of getting products to market, etc., and closures. So a range of different partnerships, some of which hopefully will continue on in the future. So very quickly, there was this project here. This is actually not a project that was in reaction to COVID-19. This was a project that was actually launched in 2011, supported by the Baltic Sea Coast Flag in Germany. The point of this, of showing you this, is the fact that by having already launched this in the past, the local community was a lot better equipped to deal with the consequences of COVID-19 when it hit. Okay, so this was launched a while back. They had 11 fishing companies involved, which was most of the fishing companies in the area. And basically it was an online system that was set up, a web portal, whereby fishermen would send their catch details by SMS before they arrived at port, saying, okay, today I have flounder and whatever, and I'll be arriving at this port at whatever time. Consumers then could then see online what was being landed, where and when, and they could either place orders online or just turn up straight to the port, look for the boat that they saw was had the fish they wanted. Here you have the photos, and they would come and collect their fish. So a very simple system, but it meant at the time it meant higher prices for the fishermen rather than selling solely through wholesale, shorter supply chains, and diversified supply chains, especially, so that they had less dependence on wholesale. The project was quite successful, and subsequently was joined by a local fish farm, and then even a mobile truck that could sell fish directly when markets were closed. When COVID struck, that actually allowed the local fishing industry to quite easily sell online. They didn't have to set up a system. It was already in place. And the website saw an 80% increase in visits just in 1 month. From March to April last year, visits were up 80%, and daily customers coming to buy fish in the local ports increased from 500 to 700 a day. And that was despite a big fall in tourists, because tourists would make up quite a large percentage as well of the customers of these boats. So despite tourism being practically wiped out, direct sales actually still increased quite substantially. And fishers reported 10 to 20% increase in direct sales. Okay, so that's I think it's had longer term consequences as well, strengthening links with consumers and changing behaviour to more local sales. This project here was actually set up in support, so as a reaction to COVID very quickly. So what I mentioned, the other one was having done the groundwork in advance, that community was able to withstand that shock. Here, and it's often one of the difficulties with community-led local development is that sometimes the procedures are quite lengthy. Projects take quite a long time to put in place, to get funded, to get approved. In this case, so COVID, I think in France, they went into confinement mid-March, and by the beginning of April, they had already launched a project which brought together, it was basically the flag managed to bring together a range of different people, including the Provincial Fishing Committee, which acted as the project beneficiary, so the lead partner, working in collaboration with fishers from the area, a fish farm, which was very unusual for fishers to collaborate with aquaculture producers. They're not renowned for being massively friendly, and a filleting company. And they basically provided fish to restaurants. So a lot of the restaurants were closed. This provided a basically income for certain restaurants and managed to be able to keep them in business for a certain amount of to a certain extent, and volunteers for actually distributing the fish, etc. So what happened was the fish farm and the fishers provided fish. They were paid by the flag for that fish. A filleting company was mobilized to fillet that, get it to the restaurants, who would then provide ready-made meals for hospital staff, firemen, and also an association which was providing meals to families that were below the poverty threshold. That was a new contact. So Flag didn't know this association before. It's a local a local branch of a national association helping poor families. And there had been a lot of demand. Basically, in the hospitals, staff were no longer able to take in, and I think the canteens were closed. Heating up their food, they could no longer do. They had to go out to buy food, which meant time wasted. Often they just didn't have time. So there was the Flag managed to get in touch with the hospitals and meet a big demand for actually just being able to eat and keep up their strength for the day. So again, completely new partnerships that were created there. The Flag, as you see here, provided the funding to the fishermen and to the restaurants. They also, because not all the fishermen were involved in this, not all the local fishermen, but they actually also, as part of the project, provided branded cool boxes to all local fishermen. So there's 60 odd fishermen in the area. All of them got about 10 cool boxes. So 200 cool boxes were provided so that they could actually undertake direct sales as well, door to door and other types of direct sales, resulting again basically in a strengthened local food network and partnerships generally in the area. So some of the short-term results were this project actually happened for 3 months. So from
Sorry, Monica, you have to speed up a little bit.
Fine.
Sorry.
I'm done. So it was a 3-month project, basically a short-term one from April till June, providing income to local fishermen and restaurants, stimulating restaurants to innovate with new products. They weren't used to doing these ready-made meals. And of course, actually providing meals to some of the frontline workers and families in need. I think it was 600 meals a week or something they were providing. Long-term, as I mentioned, new partnerships, strengthened visibility for the primary sector, and it fed into initiatives for circular economy and innovation, etc. And in conclusion, just on the importance of having these local groups in place is the networks that they can mobilize, funding if they can get that out quickly, flexibility, and of course a long-term vision. So building on this has been a very short-term project, but building on that for future local networks, basically. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. And again, apologies for having to wrap up, but I hope there will be voices in the discussion. There are already some voices in the chat. So I'll pass on then to Peter Ramsden, who's Vice President of LDnet and the brain behind this series of webinars, and he will help us animate the discussion, which hopefully we can extend a little bit beyond 7 o'clock if people don't mind, seeing that there's a lot of interest. Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Ursula. I don't want to really be described as the brain, but it was a joint effort, or it is a joint effort. So I've got a few questions coming through. Can we start with Marie Corman? If you want, you've got a thing about the fish and meat. Can you, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, which I presume is to Monica.
Yes, actually, some win and some lose, and in these instances, we can see that there were gains for the fishing community. But then I wonder about those who sell other things, like those who sell meat. Was this taken into consideration by local people? So how to make it a win-win situation for all, for the whole community? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Monica, do you want to come back on that? I'll just add one thing, which is that grocery sales in general have increased throughout the pandemic in most countries because people are not going out to eat in restaurants. So in a way, we see a slightly larger domestic market and a professional market probably shrinking. But Monica, any comment on the poor meat?
I can't really comment too much, to be honest, on the meat side of things. The flags, their main target audience is supporting the fisheries and aquaculture sectors. Sometimes they collaborate with leader lags and on promoting local products more generally. But I don't really have information in terms of within the COVID context. I don't know to what extent. I'm imagining that leader lags have been trying to do the same for local producers that they support. Most flags they start with the fishery sector.
Okay.
But certainly where that can be done together, and that's definitely helpful.
Monica, right. I think can very quickly just add, but the idea is that even in spite of the emergency, I think the flags are always acting within a certain strategy. And the strategic approach is really to make sure that, well, they're not big losers in the community. That's the whole thing. You're looking at the whole community in the end. So you're probably trying to make sure that while you strengthen the fishermen, you're not actually weakening your meat producers at the same time. That's the principle of local strategic approach to local development.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to pick up now with Kirsten Burke, who made a point about over-tourism. And Kirsten, are you still on? And do you want to? I presume your point is more to Giuseppe.
Hi. Yeah.
Great.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. No, it's just that. From the point, I mean, we would normally send lots of tourists to the southern part of Europe. Now we couldn't do that due to the COVID, and we were short of places where to go. And they thought it was a fantastic idea because the islands have always wanted more people, right? So they just said, okay, free ferries for walkers and bicycles. And that meant that lots and lots of people went to the islands. And I think that for many of the islanders, it was too much and it was not cooperated with them. So I was just curious as to if this has been seen. Thank you.
So, and this was in Denmark, yeah?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. So we see the growth of the misnamed staycation. The original staycation was that you stayed at home, but now it's become you stay in your own country. The problem on beaches, on all sorts of littering in places as well, happening in daily tourism locations. So Giuseppe, do you want to comment on that, or does anyone else want to step in?
I think it's only a problem of communication between local communities and the state in this case. So it's a common strategy, but also about an information about the capacity in terms of touristic reception and the things. But in Naples, it could happen the same because there is no coordination. It's really a problem of understanding each other and dialogue.
Okay. But yeah, the whole question of capacity of local areas being suddenly overloaded when the foreign weekend holiday or the foreign week away has been cancelled. Sandra Kana, you mentioned that you see a common thread running through the examples around. Well, do you want to introduce your point, Sandra, if you're still on?
Yes, I'm still here. I do not see a common thread. I see a common issue which has been addressed by all the speakers in all the examples, which refers to increased digitalization. And I was wondering if in those examples, challenges related to that have been observed.
So what challenges have been observed in relation to digitization? Anyone? Monica, perhaps?
All of us.
Okay.
Sure, just briefly, and that's why really I presented a project, an old project, because from the fisheries sector's point of view, fishermen have not necessarily been the most sort of avant-garde in terms of technology, or the first to want to adopt new ways of doing things. So those who suddenly saw, oh, we need new ways of selling, it's been very difficult. There's been a lot of work for the flags to try and now they're convinced suddenly, because the situation has convinced them to sort of do what flags have perhaps been telling them for some years that they should be doing. So in that respect, it's helped them, convince them to do it. But now there's the whole, the time it takes to then actually learn how to go online, how to plan your sales online, and that's a big learning curve, and it doesn't happen from one day to the other.
Okay, so the need for, in a sense, lead time and being the ones who are already prepared and already set up were in a much better position to cope than those ones who are starting from scratch. Giuseppe, did you want to come in as well?
Joanna Story also would like to come in, Peter.
Yes, I saw that. I'll bring her in a second. Giuseppe, do you want to comment on the digitization and particularly around the small and medium providers in Naples, perhaps?
Yeah, the main problem is that nobody save himself alone. It's not a sectoral approach. That's why we need digitalization to enter in a more holistic approach in the city. I think, for example, look at the tourist. The tourist needs a lot of things. It's not only from the touristic sector, but from all the sectors. That doesn't happen if you don't digitalize all. And so that's what we experienced. Let's say transportation. The tourist needs to have a transportation. They need to use the transportation in order to be sustainable. You have to provide them information and they can choose their behaviors. But at the same time, they need many other things. If you are a touristic provider, you need to get information from other sectors, and you cannot get this information without digitalization.
Okay. Lola, do you want to come in on this digitalization point as well? That's Lola from Guadalajara. Okay, I'm going to move on.
I've just got one small point to add, Peter, just to mention on that is that while, of course, it takes sort of building new platforms or websites, that takes time, what some of the flags have been successful in doing quickly is using existing platforms like Facebook, WhatsApp, and in some cases, those they've actually managed to adopt quite quickly and set up networks very quickly using existing and platforms that people already know how to use.
Okay, and I mean, one point I would add about platforms is that if you're visiting anywhere, whether it's a rural area or a city, it's very hard to see all the local information in one place. So the heritage information is in one bunch of probably individual websites. You've got booking information, you've got transport information, but they're all completely fragmented. And the need for cities and rural areas to try and bring these together is perhaps really important. I just want to, Joanna Story had a point about the fear of rural areas in relation to COVID. So it's not all a blessing having all your, I'm in a rural area now, and people here always are frightened of the Parisians bringing the virus. Joanna, is that the same point that you wanted to make?
No, there was another point as well about the challenge of the digitalization. I mean, I've worked online from a rural area for many, many years, and the last couple of years before COVID, it was my internet access was brilliant. You know, it was just starting to really, really improve. And then you had COVID, and many people moved out to the rural areas. And I'm back to where I was before. So, you know, it's like the challenge on the actual system, because in rural areas, you tend to rely on mobile internet, and we have got very good mobile coverage, but the internet will only allow a certain amount of bandwidth out into the very, you know, rural areas. And the further out you go, the less that is, and the more you know, as people move out, the more challenge there is on that particular system. So it's been, you know, quite difficult to go back, if you like, to not having the access. And this also presents challenges for those who are trying to up their game within the, you know, this digitalization, because they're having to rely on it more, but then it's also squeezed through the use of people who are teleworking.
I think some countries or some editions of Netflix, they lowered the resolution because there were so many users online that no one could do anything productive. Obviously, Netflix is mostly transmitting to receive rather than the other way, but it affects in a village, it can affect everybody's bandwidth. I want to bring a couple, thank you very much for that, Joanna. Bring a couple more people in. Vladimir, I want you to make your point about policy and sort of national decisions. And then I want to bring Blanca in, who wants to say something about a briefing from AIDL. But first of all, to Vladimir, if you're there.
Yes.
Great.
Hello also from my side. I'm coming from a small country, from North Macedonia. And I'm also aware that in the past year, due to the new situation of the COVID, we saw a lot of decisions, subventions, supports of the government towards some businesses. And also my question is how to see that some of these financial instruments which are redirecting to supporting the rural areas can be heard, because usually in these processes, most powerful actors is influencing to get the subsidies. So I was trying to ask, do you have maybe some examples where the local communities have influence receiving some subsidies, subventions from the government? Thank you.
Okay, I think it's a really good question. I'm not sure. So I think your original question on the chat also said, have examples of local areas who are influencing policies, not just subventions. I'm not sure we do in our pocket right now, but I think it's a really good area for us to look. So perhaps we'll respond by doing a scan of any experiences that we hear about, and we'll come back to you, but not right now on that one, unless anyone has any immediate response to that. Who's you can put your hand up, or
Peter, I'm not sure if I can really respond to Vladimir's concern, but I think that in community-led local development, we actually put the funding in the hands of the local communities, and we actually make sure that they have the capacity to help the most, let's say, the unusual suspects, not those that usually have access to the big money, partly because it's also quite small grants.
Okay, but I think that's absolutely true. But it's when something like new policies are happening. I mean, a good example being the one raised on by Berka about the islands. I'm sure the islands were not adequately consulted about the question of the free transport pass. And this question of the small communities in general, whether it's neighborhoods in cities or villages and rural communities, they find it very difficult to get their voice heard at national level, even harder at EU level. We don't have much time. I just want to pick up a couple more points. Blanca, you had something you wanted to say about an AEIDL briefing on lessons. Do you just want to give a quick 1-minute publicity?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. I was just to share with you. Thank you so much for organizing the event. And we really think that sharing all this knowledge, experience are really useful. The briefing that I shared in the chat was prepared by the ADL, the European Association and Information for Local Development. And we prepare just taking a limited number of initiatives from the point of view of social innovation, more than individual experience or initiative, more community perspective, and also targeting topics like digital village or shared mobility. And also we highlighted the relevance of having a target at rural level, because we have several policies and instruments that they are not accounting or having special indicators at rural level. Then we don't know really how things progress because we don't measure. Okay,
thank you. And you've left a link in the chat, I think, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And we'll also put the link in we'll do a note of this meeting and we'll make a link there as well.
Thank you.
I had one other person I was going to bring in who had not so much a question, more of a point. It was Kim Smedsland. And I don't know if you're still there, Kim, if you just want to say very quickly something.
Oh, yes, hello, from Kim from Finland and from Prepare. No, it was a flow of thoughts, but I was thinking that COVID is creating kind of new realities. We already know we have different realities in rural areas, but also in towns, small towns and cities. And COVID is creating, again, different realities. And I don't know, I'm not sure if the politicians are going to react to these different realities again, or are they still having one regulation or one system that is supposed to kind of manage those new realities? And are we ready for that? And my one of the biggest concerns with the young people that are depressed because of this, but it's a different story. Thank you.
Okay, no, well, thanks very much for that. And the idea of new realities, and in a way, the response to the national and governmental response has been very top down so far. And I suppose we're interested in how more nuanced local approaches can take off. We're running out of time. I said we'd finish at 6 o'clock. We started 2 or 3 minutes late. So I'm going to just indulge us by 2 or 3 minutes and ask Robert if he can just bring in a couple of his comments, but they're going to have to be very brief, about resilience and the link to sustainability, perhaps. So Robert, if you can just very quickly share your screen and come online, and then I'll leave Ursula to talk us out after Robert. Okay, Robert.
Okay, I just thought in the preparation of this webinar that the COVID crisis has kind of brought into our consciousness very brutally what has been discussed at a rather abstract level under the motto of resilience. And there I want just to point to an institutional innovation, a good idea which one of the managing authorities for rural development programs had. In this case, the Bavarian Ministry of Food, Agriculture and Forestry. Already before the crisis, they published a paper where they pulled together resilience concepts and how to operationalize them. And they produced a guidance paper on resilience for RDP measures 2023 to 27, especially for LEADER, CLLD LEADER, because they made a link between the leader, the features of the leader method and the resilience processes. They consider resilience rather as processes than as traits. So they can be persistence, resistance, recovery, adaptation, or transformation according to the context. In nature preservation, you will have the need to bounce back into, for example, after a forest fire, you want to recover the forest. So you bounce back into a previous optimal state. But in the case of COVID, we need to bounce forward. We have to transform, we have to adapt, we have to change the whole setup of the economy, which is unsustainable in the long term. And the paper gives very, very helpful hints for planners, local people, local actors to develop their local development strategies under this tenet or umbrella of the resilience thinking. They stipulate that the way towards more vital and adaptive rural communities is paved by considering concurrently at the same time 5 challenges, which is climate protection and adaptation, resource preservation and biodiversity, securing services of general interest, basic needs in local reach, local and regional value added, circular economy, of course, and social cohesion. So this would strengthen according to the philosophy of that guidance paper, the local resistivity, robustness, paired with adaptive, the ability to bounce back and forward at the same time according to the needs. Unfortunately, I think it's only available in German. I have put the source down here. And if you like to have a little bit more about the theoretical background, I put another source, which is English, a kind of synthesis paper about resilience concepts, cross-disciplinary, which I found very useful. That was my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. So I'm now, that's really helpful. And I'm just trying to list the 5 things in the chat while I hand over to Ursula to close us out.
Okay, thanks. It's just impossible to summarize all the points because they were quite a wide range. My general maybe thought, comment is that COVID has not so much brought new issues as it has accentuated or reinforced the points that were already important for local development before, but they even with COVID, they became even more important if possible. And I picked out a few that out of the many that were mentioned. One is definitely the need for strategic, broader thinking, not just focusing on one sector. And I think that this was not just a question of winners and losers between fish and meat, but also the discussion about fitting the COVID measures into the wider depopulation strategy, or actually using the opportunity of COVID to combat depopulation. But that really takes more strategic thinking, not just reacting to urgent, to short-term, let's say, urgencies in the first place. The second, of course, that Monica already mentioned, but I think it has been reinforced, is linkages. That linkages between, for example, the different things that tourists need. So making sure that they are integrated, and digitalization is just one tool, but the first maybe factor needs to be cooperation between the different actors. And the third is the decision-making and impact of the local level, making sure that people at the local level actually have their voice heard. Again, this is something that COVID has shown as even more, potentially even more important than it was before. Don't know if there's time to bring further issues, but we will definitely encourage you to bring comments, to react to the post we will make from the event on our website, and continue the debate also in the next webinars, as Peter mentioned before. I don't know, Peter, I hand over to you for the wrap up, I mean, not the wrap up, but maybe just the closing comment or whatever.
Okay, thanks very much, Ursula. That was really useful. Well, just to finally conclude, thank you to our speakers who were very lively and dynamic, to the three case study presenters. Lola, particularly Giuseppe, and also I'm missing somebody off. Monica. Thanks also to Robert, who put some theory in a way into the discussion as well as did Ursula at the end. And thanks to you as an audience who were very dynamic. And we look forward to seeing you next Thursday at 6 o'clock. And we promise never to go more than 5 minutes or 6 minutes over. Thank you again, and I'm going to stop right there.
And Peter, we are going to be inviting all the participants to the final, the fourth webinar. You don't need to register now. It is by invitation, so we can try to bring things together and draw conclusions from the whole series.
Okay, so yes, you'll all be invited to that fourth one, which is 4 weeks from now. And thanks also to our backroom effort from not least from Harris. Thank you. I think we should close out there, and thanks again. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Who's left?
It's mainly us.
8.
Yeah.
And maybe some people who didn't notice that we finished.
Yeah,
Insiders and sleepers.
Yes.
Hi, Alistair.
Yes, good to see you, Alistair. Great.
Hello.
We don't have to record anymore, Harris. I suppose we can switch off the recording.
Sorry for the missing slide.